What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So I wanted to visit our top 30 draft picks that we brought in for visits for this 2023 NFL draft. And just keep in mind, you don't have to use all 30. We didn't even necessarily start adding a lot of these guys to the list until like the last week or two. Maybe the mid toward latter portion of March. We only had 10 visits, which was one of the lowest counts in the NFL. So obviously, we have the Aaron Rodgers focus. There was other trades we're trying to pull off between OBJ, trying to sign guys like Calais Campbell that got away. So there's some things that maybe would have interfered there. But nonetheless, we were able to get a pretty decent list of prospects put together. So just in case you guys aren't aware, so top 30 draft visits. What does that mean? So a team has the ability to bring in a player to their facility. They can do things like conduct interviews, meetings. They can do physicals on them, run through medicals, have them actually conduct workouts, pretty much the entire gambit, right? And so it really gives you a much more intimate setting in your own facility. If there's a certain weakness or a certain strength you want to confirm, different things like that. That's what a lot of these visits are good for. But we also have to be cautious because there are teams that are playing, three-dimensional chess out here. And you want to be cautious because some of the visits that are coming out are going to be smoke screens, right? And that works for us just as well as other teams. You may want to, bring in a top draft prospect. Maybe you are just picking up some additional information in case somebody slides to you or you decide maybe you want to trade up. But ultimately, you can use that to kind of sway where another team that possibly needs to move up for the same position is thinking that you want to go. But nonetheless, so I ran through our list and it's pretty interesting. So the most amount of or the position that has the most amount of visits accounted for with us is offensive tackle, and that shouldn't be a surprise. We brought in 5 players for visits. Next up, we actually started taking a look at running backs, and then everything else has been split up. We've taken a look at a guard, a cornerback, a couple linebackers, a safety, a tight end, a defensive end. We've brought in a center, a defensive tackle, and we've even, taken a glance at a wide receiver. So before we kind of jump into, a little bit more in regards to those positions, I did find it particularly interesting that at least with Joe Douglas at the top of the draft, it seems like there's always at least one player. I know we've had multiple over the years, but there's at least one player that's going to get picked up out of these group of guys that we've been looking at. If you take a look at the 2021 draft class, we brought in Zach Wilson, we brought in Michael Carter. We ended up drafting both of those guys. Obviously, top pick and a mid-round pick, but with the round 1 selections, those seem to be generally where you can pretty much bet your money on that one of those guys are going to be at our position. You take a look at last year, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, we end up drafting both of those guys. So we talked about some of the breakdowns of the volume of players at each positions that we brought in. Who are some of the higher rated prospects on this list for us, right? So we have Anton Harrison, the tackle out of Oklahoma. We have Diane Henley out of Washington State, the linebacker. Paris Johnson, tackle out of Ohio State. BJ Ojulari, probably not going to be a first-round prospect, but a guy that's high up there on the list, especially if we end up trading back towards the end of round 1, then you can potentially see a chance being taken there. You take a look at somebody like John Michael Smith, for example. He's another guy that we brought in, and actually he's probably the guy that we've had the most amount of visits with, private workouts, bringing him in, meeting with him at the combine, senior bowls, different things like that. So we've been keeping a strong tab on what's going on with him. And then Broderick Jones, tackle out of Georgia. So if we indeed want to go tackle, of course, 12 teams ahead of us, we got to see how the board is going to fall. You like your chances with potentially 3, I'm not comfortable really saying 4, but 3 quarterbacks going within the top 10 picks. There's definitely going to be at least a cornerback or 2 when you think about like Devon Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez that are going to go. And then you're talking about Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. So that's a good quick math, 6 to 7 players that are going to be guaranteed taken ahead of you, and then everything else is going to be kind of up for debate. But still, there's going to be other guys out there, especially at like the edge position, that you can see being in those top 10 picks, and maybe somebody worth a gamble. So think kind of a wild card like Nolan Smith out there. So for the players that we just mentioned, it looks like Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones would probably be the two biggest names that we would key in on. Anything else in terms of movement for us to get later into the first round, or if we want to talk about like a high second round selection, you start looking at a guy like Anton Harrison. You start looking at guys like B.J. Ojulari that we mentioned. Tyler Steen is probably more of a third round guy, but who knows how the tackle board for us is set up. And then you start looking at a guy like John Michael Schmitz, as definitely end of round 1, early round 2 choices. So ultimately, taking a look at this, the offensive line was going to be a primary due diligence for us, right? We want to make sure we can set up the long term. We have 3 tackles all coming back from injuries or illness in Max Mitchell, Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown. Dwayne Brown's an aging veteran, probably going to retire once his contract is up. Max Mitchell you have around for the long haul, but then you have to make a tough decision with Mekhi Becton. So you don't really have 100% insurance for the next 2 to 3 years at that position, especially if Max Mitchell maybe doesn't progress the way we like this year. So you definitely want to make sure that you have your bases covered there. Obviously, we'd like to have another center in the building for the next 10 to 15 years again. So JMS makes a lot of sense for us. But I did find some of the other guys that we researched a little bit interesting. For example, we had tight end Luke Schoonmaker into the building. Luke coming out of Michigan. He's a later round prospect, maybe 4th to 5th round, but this tight end class has been talked about quite a bit as one that, from like a fantasy perspective, could reshape the game, essentially transform it, revitalize it, breathe some life back into it. Because for the most part, you were looking at guys like Travis Kelce, and then that was it, right? It's 2 or 3 guys realistically, the TJ Hawkinsons, the Godards of the world. Realistically, that was really going to be it. But you're talking about potential starting tight end caliber players into the 4th and 5th. We did have the rumors that we want to add a little bit more athleticism, explosiveness to that room, even though we already have, CJ and Tyler as the veterans at the top of the roster. So I can't be mad at it. I do also like some of the running backs that we brought in, taking a look at guys like Zach Evans, taking a look at guys like Keaton Mitchell, and Dwayne McBride most recently. So even though Robert Saleh said he loves his running back room, you always want to continue to try to add that competition and stuff, right? You don't have Ty Johnson hanging around for the long haul. 1 year re-sign Michael Carter. You're confident that he can get back to what he was, but still, you want to make sure that you can keep things being churned out and having that pipeline, especially at the running back position where teams are, year after year less likely to want to pay their running backs, a fair market top dollar value if they're producing in that manner. So we'll see ultimately how things pan out. If I had to bet my money on it, just based on how the top 30 draft visits have went and the choices we made in the first round, if Paris Johnson is on the board or Broderick Jones is there, go ahead and pencil it in. Joe Douglas is probably going to go and hand the card in himself and ensure that he has a tackle that potentially can start right now, but as well as be groomed for the future if we can get a Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown tandem, or, Mekhi Becton and Max Mitchell to hold down the fort in year 1. So, I don't know. Curious what your guys' thoughts are. I'm going to... I'll probably have the list here actually for you shortly. I know we're wrapping the video up, but I'll put the list up a little bit higher in the video, the first minute or 2 for you guys, just so you can run through. Let me know what your thoughts are on the players that we brought in. Is there anybody that piques your interest? And I'll catch you guys again.